2025, Gen Z was asked one simple question in a survey. Are you in therapy right now? 42% said yes. And that's not a typo. Close to half of an entire generation is in therapy, in active treatment, talking to someone about their inner life on a regular basis. And in that same survey, almost the same number, about 42%, said that they are regularly depressed. That's roughly double the rate of people who are depressed over 25. So here's the thing I can't stop turning over. We're the most therapized generation in human history. Got more access, less stigma, better tools than anyone. And we're not okay. Therapy is not the problem. The problem is that most of us are stopping one floor too early. I've spent a decent amount of time looking at modern psychology and old traditions side by side and watching what actually changes someone's life versus what makes a hard week survivable for an individual. And the pattern is consistent enough across the board that I'll say it straight. There is a kind of work that therapy is built to do, and a kind it mostly isn't. For starters, most people don't realize that the second kind even exists. They assume talking to a professional about their problems is as deep as it goes. They're not close to the truth, however. There's a whole layer underneath, and almost nobody points at it. If you stick until the end of this video, here's what you will walk away with. A clear map of the 3 floors on working on yourself. Where therapy lives, where inner work lives, and one question that drops you to a deeper level of self-awareness. By the end, you'll also know what floor you are stuck on, often for years. One thing before we start, because it matters. None of this is anti-therapy. If you're in a dark place, therapy is the floor, not the ceiling. Get the help. This video is about what comes after the help starts working and where you go from there. Picture what most people mean when they say they're working on themselves. They book the sessions, they learn the language, they can tell you about their attachment styles, their triggers, their trauma responses. They've got the whole vocabulary of someone who has done a lot of work. They can diagnose themselves in a single sentence, and a lot of the time, nothing fundamental moves. Same patterns narrated more fluently. The self-awareness goes up, but the actual life stays exactly where it was. We have confused being articulate about our problems with being free of them. Those are not the same skill. I've watched myself and a few other people close to me do this for years. We could explain why we kept choosing the wrong thing. The origin story, the childhood, the entire chain of cause and effect. It's almost like we understood the pattern better than the therapist did, and we kept running the same pattern in different situations over and over. That used to genuinely confuse me. If I understand something about myself, why doesn't it change? It took me a long time to see what was actually going on. Understanding a pattern and being free from a pattern are 2 completely different floors, and almost everything we call self-work happens on the first floor and then stops. Here's the structural thing that most people miss about therapy, and I say that as someone who is grateful for it. The therapy most people can access now is built to do one job exceptionally well: deregulate stress, calm the system, get you functional again, bring the symptoms down so rest of your week becomes livable. That's not a knock, that's a triage. And don't get me wrong, triage saves lives. Because when the house is on fire, you don't renovate the foundation, you put the fire out. But look at where the therapy boom actually went. Mark Olfson and a team at Columbia tracked outpatient therapy across the United States and found that psychotherapy use jumped sharply in the last few years. The interesting part wasn't the growth, it was who grew with therapy. The rise landed mostly among people with mild to moderate distress. The more functional, the more advantaged. Teletherapy, in particular, made it easy to book a weekly session to take the edge off a stressful life. So we built a system that is brilliant at taking the edge off. And then we quietly mistook taking the edge off as transformation. We started treating maintenance like it was renovation. Here's the cost of that mix-up. If your only goal is to get better by end of this week, by end of Friday, then you are managing a self that you never actually change. You get really, really good at coping with being you, as you are today. You become a smooth operator of your own existing dysfunction. So let me hand you the map I wish I had 10 years ago. 3 floors. Working on yourself always happens at one of these floors, and they go in order of depth. Floor 1 is relief. This is regulation. The breathing, the reframing, medication when you need it, the talking it out part. The question on floor 1 is, how do I feel better? And this is where most accessible therapy reliably lives. And it's essential. You can't do deep work while you're drowning. Nobody finds themselves at the bottom of the panic attack. If you go one layer deeper, we have floor 2. Floor 2 is insight. This is understanding where the pattern came from, why you do the thing, the origin and the mechanism. The question on floor 2 is, why am I like this? Why am I the way I am? And good therapy reaches this floor with the right therapist and enough time. Also, a lot of people who get to this point feel a click of the understanding and feel like they've arrived at the final destination. The people in that story, including myself, have lived on floor 2 for years because insight felt like progress, but it wasn't moving us an inch. If we go deeper, we get to floor 3. Floor 3 is the one that almost nobody names. Let's call it evolving identity. This is not soothing the pattern, which was level 1. It's not understanding the pattern, which was level 2, but changing the self the pattern is attached to is floor 3. The question on floor 3 is different. Not how do I feel better or why am I like this, but this. Who would I have to be for this to stop being my problem at all? Your true identity is not the same thing as your emotions. And it is not the same thing as your thoughts. Once you really see that, something opens up. You can separate who you truly are from the sticky, painful experiences you got fused with. That separation is the key. The word is separation, not deletion. You can't delete what happened to you, but you can stop being welded to it and start aligning with your true identity instead of the identity that got formed by default under pressure when you were not aware. That's the move. Inner work is not gentler form of therapy. It's a different floor of the same building, usually underneath the floor that most people finally stop on. Floor 1 helps you survive the self you have. Floor 3 is the soft training that rebuilds yourself. Now, a valid question is, why does changing the self go deeper than changing the symptom itself? Here's where the modern neuroscience and the old traditions turn out to be saying the exact same thing. Your brain runs at least 2 different versions of you. One is the narrative self, the running story about who you are, your history, your traits, the labels that you got tagged with, and the commentary track that never quite shuts up. It leans heavily on the DMN, default mode network, the same circuitry that hums when your mind wanders. The other is the experiential self, the part of yourself that is here, right now, in the moment, in the body, before the story even starts. Norman Farb and his team at University of Toronto put people in brain scanners and showed these really are 2 distinct systems. And here's the finding that matters. Training can change which one is running the show. You have the ability to separate and loosen the present moment you away from the story about you. They come apart. Sit with what that implies. A lot of your suffering isn't even coming from the raw experience. The narrative self is selling its story about that experience on a loop all day, and that story is the part that actually hurts. Floor 1 work quiets that loop for a while. Inner work goes deeper. It goes after the narrator itself. And every serious tradition figured this out before the brain scanners did. The Stoics drew a hard line between the event itself and your interpretation of the event. Buddhism spent 2000 years on the gap between the observer and the observed. The yogic traditions called the deepest layer the witness, the part of you that is watching the thoughts and is therefore not your thoughts. Different vocabularies, one discovery. There's a you underneath the story, and you can discover yourself on floor 3. Once you relocate, the story starts to loosen its grip on its own. So finally, the practice for how do you actually drop a floor. Here's the simplest version I know. One question with a small stack under it. Next time something's eating at you, notice which floor your mind reaches out for. It almost always grabs floor 1. How do I stop this feeling? And that's the right move if you're on fire. But if it's a pattern and not an isolated event of fire, run these 3 questions and in this order. First, what am I actually feeling right now in my body, in the moment, before the story? That's floor 1. And it's just naming. Name it and you'll realize the volume drops down a notch. Second, whose voice is it? And where did I learn to respond this way? That's floor 2. You're looking for the origin, not to blame anyone, but to just start seeing the pattern as something separate from you. Not who you are, a program you picked up somewhere, and a program can be rewritten. Number 3, and this one goes deep. Who would I be if I no longer needed this pattern to feel safe? Don't answer it cleverly, don't answer this in a rush. Sit with it overnight, maybe for a week. Here's what you're really doing when you ask that. You're stepping out of the thoughts and into the seat of one who is watching them, the witness. And from that seat, something becomes obvious. Your identity is not fixed. It has been evolving your whole life. The same way everything in nature evolves, which means you can evolve it on purpose. You can find the links that formed under pressure, the ones that are quietly running the problem, and you can start rewiring them yourself. Now, in the present, for a different future. You can run the first 2 questions in about 60 seconds. The third one, you should carry around for at least a week before you come to a definite conclusion. And that isn't a flaw in the method. The deep layer is supposed to take a decent amount of time. It was never going to be quick. I'll leave you with one line that I keep coming back to myself. Therapy meets you where you are. Inner work changes who is standing there. Therapy is working to manage and maintain the existing status quo. Inner work is constantly evolving through transformation of your identity through action. Therapy is you getting a gym membership and showing up to the gym. Inner work is observing the strain on your muscle in that one single rep and observing the growth of your muscle as it grows through action over time. We don't have a therapy shortage in 2026. We have a depth shortage. A whole generation got fluent in the language of healing, but never got told that there is a floor beneath the floor where everyone usually stops at. If this video gave you a different way to look at inner work, I want you to sit with that third question tonight and tell me in the comments what surfaced. And if you want the 3-floor map, I've made a 1-page version of it, so let me know in the comments below and I'll share a link. If you found this useful, give me a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Thank you.